Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here at Activate Learn on Twitter. It's time for another book review, and I must admit this is my next obsession. Oh my God, I thought there would be a book that would overcome The Catcher in the Rye, but I have found it. It's Ernest Hemingway's A Moveable Feast. Oh my God, this is so brilliant. Brilliant! Why have I not read any of Hemingway's books before? And I'm glad I started with this one. I actually found this book at a local bookstore. I was wandering in through, as I usually do, looking through the shelves, and I picked this one out. Thought, Hemingway. And it had a word, Paris. The word was Paris. And I was sold. I thought, I'll get this. Might be something in it about France, which I love. And so I bought it. And it was only over the weekend I watched this movie called Midnight in Paris. You would have heard about it, Woody Allen's film. It's wonderful. And in that movie, there was a drop dead, gorgeous looking bloke who was playing Ernest Hemingway. But it wasn't his looks that I was interested in. Okay, plus. It was also some of the quotes that he said. And I thought to myself, I've got to read Hemingway. I've got to know more about this guy. And I thought, I think I have a book of his. And sure enough, I did. It was sitting on the bookshelf ready and waiting to be read. And I'm glad I read it. So what is this book about? It is about Ernest Hemingway. He spent some time in Paris after the war. He's in his 20s. He's just gotten married. He's got a young child. He's married to a lovely, I assume she was a lovely lady. She obviously was written up really well by him here because he was fond of her. Her name is Hadley. So they are in Paris. He's there in Paris to write his next novel. That's all he wants to do. He just wants to get off short stories, write his big novel. And he's surrounded by obviously life in Paris. He goes to restaurants and cafes and he sits down there with his pencil and his notebook writing his novel. And in through the day, in through the stories, he meets a whole heap of people, and he strikes me as someone who can just have a chat with anyone, a drink with anyone for sure, a gamble with anyone, that's for sure. So he's that kind of bloke. But I like those kind of blokes. Okay, it's not about me, it's about the book. So then, so it's about him writing his book and all the characters that he's met. Now, what kind of characters does he meet? He's got all the writers and the artists who are living in Paris around this time, and picture it, it's bohemian. These are kind of like the hipsters of the 20s, and they're having a great life. And all they want to do is basically focus on their craft or their art or their works, and they want to be able to get paid for their work. So all of them are keen to get paid for their art or their writing. Now, one of the things I really loved in this book is that they also helped each other out, even though Ernest Hemingway was really, really poor. And there are a few references in the book where he does talk about going hungry. He still seemed a very happy bloke. He was happy and content with his lot in life. And it seemed that his community, his group of people around him, were all keen for him to progress his writing. There was Gloria Stein, who he asked for her feedback, and they were just quite happy to do that. And they also helped each other out. I mean, he mentioned T.S. Eliot, the poet. Now, I've not read any of T.S. Eliot's poetry, but he mentioned that his group got together and actually helped T.S. Eliot out by offering some component of their pay to go towards T.S. Eliot so he could get out of his dead-end, boring batshit of a job in the bank so he could focus on poetry. So here was his community actually loving the fact that they see talent and they want to help him, but they also understand that they need to survive and they need payment. And there was another beautiful scene. It wasn't beautiful, but it really actually played a role here where F. Scott Fitzgerald struck me as someone who was quite smart in being able to change or morph his writing to make it relevant for the masses, which meant that it could be sold. And at one stage, F. Scott Fitzgerald even showed Ernest Hemingway his logbook of all the payments that he had been paid because of his writing. And at one point, it says here that it is strange now to remember thinking of Scott as an older writer, but at the time, since I had not yet read The Great Gatsby, I thought of him as a much older writer. I thought he wrote Saturday Evening Post stories that had been readable 3 years before, but I never thought of him as a serious writer. He had told me at the Closerie de Lilas how he wrote what he thought were good stories and which were really good stories for the Post, and then changed them for submission, knowing exactly how he must make the twists that made them into saleable magazine stories. I had been shocked at this, and I said I thought it was whoring. He said it was whoring, but that he had to do it as he made his money from the magazines to have money ahead to write decent books. I said that I did not believe anyone could write anyway except the very best he could write without destroying his talent. So it was stuff like that, and I thought, man, the the information in here, the stories in here are really relevant to today's work as people who are really trying to showcase and promote their talent and yet might be in work that is boring them or is numbing their life or numbing their talents and skills. The other thing I liked about this book was just the beautiful quotes. Quotes like, "We ate well and cheaply, and drank well and cheaply, and slept well and warmly, and loved each other." There was the quote of which the title is from: "If you are lucky enough to have lived in Paris as a young man, then wherever you go for the rest of you, it stays with you, for Paris is a movable feast." It is such a beautiful book. It sucked me straight into it. I loved his writing. I want to know more about Ernest Hemingway. I want to read more of his books if it's like this. Maybe the fact that I had seen a Midnight in Paris, or maybe the fact that I love anything to do with Paris or France. I just fell in love with this book, and I hope you do too. So, A Moveable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. Please read it.